you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is a great honour to follow the member for Bassett Law. Much of what he said I strongly endorse. This bill is pure good news, which is a very rare thing in Parliament in my short experience. And I do thank the Secretary of State for being true to his word and actually delivering this bill, having promised that he would do so. The situation today is desperate. Every 25 minutes, we've already heard, 25 minutes, an elephant is killed for its tusk. 20,000 a year. We've seen a 90% collapse in the elephant population in the last century. And notwithstanding the leadership that this country has shown, undoubtedly, in recent years, the UK has historically been a very big part of the problem. We heard from Traffic that it's estimated the equivalent of 1 million elephants, or the equivalent of 1 million elephants, were transported from Africa to the UK between 1860 and 1920. And we've also heard today that we're still very significant exporters of ivory today. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are on the brink of losing forever the world's most iconic species, a sentient, highly intelligent animal, and we're not doing it for any justifiable or noble reason. We're doing it so that a few people can have trinkets. And it is a brutal, barbaric business, directly funds some of the most abhorrent organizations on the planet today. It's estimated that Al-Shabaab, the organization responsible for those appalling events in the shopping mall in Nairobi, was it 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that 40% of their funding comes from the ivory trade. So we know that where poaching happens, it enriches the worst possible people, but it also destabilizes and impoverishes whole communities. We also know that bans work. In 1989, you had a worldwide ban approved by CITES, and immediately poaching levels fell dramatically, as, by the way, did the price and the value of ivory. And tragically, after suspicious levels of lobbying, 10 years later, so-called one-off sales were then allowed, and the market was flooded with legal ivory, which in turn made it easier for traders to launder illegal ivory. And it's for exactly the same reason, incidentally, that this bill today that we're passing, I very much hope we're passing, is so important. If it is passed, we will have introduced one of the toughest ivory bans in the world. And it is fantastic news. But at the risk of sounding churlish, I do want to make a few minor suggestions. First, since I very much hope that this bill is passed. I speak quicker, so by the great Secretary of State departs this chamber. I hope he catches the last point. I very much hope that this is passed before the IWT conference in October, because if we don't do that, we will lack, in my view, the authority that we're going to need in order to be able to ask other countries to do their bit. And we're going to need to ask a lot of other countries to do a great deal. Secondly, the ban will only be meaningful if it is properly enforced. So we need to provide a long-term settlement for the National Wildlife Crime Unit, as well as resources for the CITES Border Force team. Third, the bill currently applies, we've already heard this, it currently only applies to elephant ivory, and the risk is that we'll be displacing demand from elephants to other ivory-bearing species like the killer whales, sperm whales, walruses, hippos, narwhal, and so on, all of which are under varying levels of threat. There are only 100,000 hippos in the world today, which is staggeringly depressing. So I hope the government will look again at including a wider range of species in this bill. Now, in October, we have the IWT conference, following the first one 4 years ago. And it is right that we should celebrate some of the good news. China closing down its state-owned carveries. Fantastic news. Banning all domestic ivory trade at the end of last year. The US introducing a near-total ban. Hong Kong promising to do the same. But I think we must also acknowledge that the problem is growing, not shrinking, despite everything we've heard and seen over the last few years. So this conference is an opportunity for us to exhibit real ambition. We need to use every lever at our disposal to encourage other countries, including the members of the European Union, to introduce their own ivory bans as a matter of urgency. We need to tackle online crime. We heard a bit from a previous speaker, the Honourable Member for Bassett Law. So much of the trade has shifted online, and I recommend colleagues read a recent report of IFOR called Disrupt Wildlife Cybercrime. It paints a very, very bleak picture, but it also gives reason to be cheerful. In March this year, 21 companies, including Google, eBay, Facebook, Instagram, Microsoft, Alibaba, other organizations as well, joined up with WWF and IFOR and Traffic, and they launched a global coalition to end wildlife trafficking online. And it works. eBay, in just 1 year, removed 25,000 listings from their site. We also need to expand the focus of this summit beyond ivory. In the past decade, more than 7,000 rhinos have been poached for their horns. Grey parrots are being hoovered out of the African continent at a totally unsustainable rate. Since 2000, 1 million pangolins have been caught and sold for meat and medicine. And fisheries are being desecrated by illegal fishing operations all around the world, plunging the communities that depend on them into desperate situations, desperate poverty. This is organised crime on a massive scale, and that needs to be reflected in our approach. Finally, and again, I'm going to echo some remarks made by my previous speaker, we need to see a much greater emphasis on this and a greater level of commitment from the Department for International Development. It is extraordinary that just 0.4% of our vast ODA budget goes to nature, let alone tackling the illegal wildlife trade. We may be part of a small club of nations honouring our commitment to meeting the UN target on overseas aid, but we are miles behind countries like Germany, the USA and others when it comes to funding restoration of ecosystems, tackling wildlife crime, protecting the environment. There is a link between poverty alleviation and environmental sustainability. It is well established, it is unarguable, and that must finally now be reflected in the work of the Department for International Development, not least so the public, many of whom are very sceptical about that department's very existence, can buy into it and understand what it does. It's time for DFID to wake up. Yes, I was finishing now, but I will still take an intervention.
Grateful to him. He just ruined his peroration. Would he agree with me that there would be a great deal more buy-in from the public if the Department for International Development was renamed the Department for International Development and Conservation, so people could understand that that was a key part of its mission?
I agree with the thought behind his question, whether that should be the name or not, but I absolutely agree with where he's coming from. There is a clear link. One only has to look at Somalia. There is a direct link between the collapse of the fisheries off the coast of Somalia, the moment when it was declared a dead zone by the United Nations, and the rise in piracy. You had tens of thousands of families with boats and children to feed, knowledge of the seas, no fish to catch. What did they do? They became pirates. The same is now just beginning to happen around Senegal as a consequence of illegal activities by boats, vessels from all around the world. When you destroy ecosystems, you plunge the poorest people, the people who most depend on the free services that nature provides, into hideous poverty. It is the most destabilizing thing we can do, and DFID has not yet exhibited any understanding whatsoever of that well-known and well-understood phenomenon. And it's time, as I said before, that they wake up. Thank you.